I've been throwing the discus since 1970, and I've been lifting weights since 1965. And in the late 1990s, the world rediscovered kettlebells. Well, one of the things I liked about kettlebells was its influence on my throwing. Now, certainly when the 90s rolled around, and then of course the 2000s, I had several of the best years of my career. At age 47, I threw as far as I'd ever thrown in my entire life, with 2 full-time jobs, 2 middle school girls at home, my wife on the road all the time. But it was a wonderful time for experiment and learning. If I was to say there was 3 things I took away from the time, number 1 would be a program we call Easy Strength, which we'll reference a little bit in this video. Number 2, loaded carries, which we don't reference at all really in this little talk, but these were game changers for me. And then finally, the use of kettlebells, but specifically kettlebells out on the field with the discus. So what I'd like to talk to you today is the influence of kettlebells on my career and how it unlocks some doors in my thinking about high-level performance. So even if you're not a thrower, if you're interested in performance, now performance is when someone says your name at a certain time, at a certain location, on a certain day, and you step up and compete. So let's begin. These are kind of fun statements that I like to roll back to all the time. These are the truths of what I do, my foundational statements. Steve Bakari, the boxing coach, once said, "Any drill that 70% of the fighters cannot catch on to right away has to be eliminated no matter how good it is." Well, this got me thinking about all the drills we used to do in the discus throw. And we would spend lots of time teaching this drill. Then all of a sudden you realize that the drill didn't really help them throw farther. In American football, I was taught as a 9th grader to do this thing called monkey rolls. And that's where 3 athletes basically roll around the ground and jump over each other. You know what, honestly, it was a good conditioner. It took a while to learn, and it had no carryover to the field of play. Lots of stuff happens like that in traditional sports. You do these things that look like they're helping, but don't help at all. That's one issue. But if it takes you this much time to teach something, maybe we just throw it out and find something that's a little bit better. Of course, I've spent my whole career with this quote from Dan Gable: "If it's important, do it every day. If it isn't, don't do it at all." That's why I believe that we had a lot of success with my throwers, because we throw every day. We do full turns every day. In fact, we do more full turns than any program I've ever been associated with. Because, as I tell my athletes, throwers throw. When I work with hurdlers, they hurdle. Sprinters sprint. If it's important, that's what you need to do. And if it's not, you got to sit back and say, why are we doing this? My coach, Coach Ralph Mon, famously told me, only recruit 2 things, speed and smarts. You can teach everything else. I look back and I think I was pretty smart and I was pretty fast, and maybe that's why I went to Utah State University. But that is interesting. I firmly believe if you're smart enough, I can teach you everything else. And if you're gifted with some speed, you're going to be pretty good too. And this last quote is just a joke quote I always run back to. Rome wasn't built in a day, but I wasn't the foreman on that job either. I tell my athletes that all the time. It's one of those stupid dad jokes I love to keep beating them with. So I look at things different than most coaches do, and actually kettlebells really help me with what I think helps throwers. There's some things we don't do when I train throwers. First off, we don't warm up. We do the movements, we might do lifting, but if practice starts at 3, we are discus throwers at 3 o'clock. We don't really run. Now we do hill sprints. But I know high school programs where these poor kids have to do a daily 1-mile run and then do plyometrics and then do an hour of flexibility and then do mobility work and then have a team meeting where everyone cools back down so the coach can go over the bus schedule for the next 3 years. And then the kids go out and throw 3, 4, 5, 6 times. In that same amount of time, my kids might do 500 to 1,000 turns. We don't do standing throws. It is a drill. It's a basic drill. But I don't think it carries over to the full turns. We do very, very few of them. We don't do any jogging. If you need conditioning, If you need conditioning, we've got another set of tools to deal with that. Whether this next line is true or not is really up to you as a coach and the belief of your athletes. I think every athlete I coach can be a state champion. And I'm very clear about that when I first start to work with them. I have been wrong about some athletes who are good enough to be state champions, but very often you look back and it was some things that happened. Sometimes there was a better athlete, and sometimes we missed some details. And this last one is a tough one for many coaches to get a handle on. When I'm working with throwers, I don't like our practices to last over 1 hour. The schools I always taught in were very academic places, and I was more concerned about my athletes' academics than I was about their athletics. So I tried real hard to focus and narrow things down so that we got the job done as quickly as we can. I don't like waiting around. I don't like standing around. I like to see people do, not watch. So with the foundational statements and then the little things that I do different, let's look at what I do. For years, this is the system I have used. This is our approach to elite performance. And I call it the three-phased approach. One thing you'll notice that there's basically three kind of pyramids here. The thing you might notice as you look is that I'm a big believer in having a strong foundation of heavy lifting early in the season. If I have an athlete playing football, as soon as they get out of football, we start getting them strong again. Here's the interesting thing. If they just finished football or volleyball, they don't need conditioning. They're in shape. What they need to do is get back in the weight room and get a little bit stronger. You also need to notice that leg on heavy lifting goes all the way deep into the competitive season. After a few weeks, or in some cases months, of just getting stronger, we begin the period we call heavy throwing. Heavy throwing doesn't necessarily just mean overweight implements, though we use them. It also means that we're going to be throwing a lot, heavy, if you will. And as the season starts sneaking up on us, we're going to start easing off that heavy throwing period so that's time to compete. Now, I'll come back to this, but understand that I'm not talking about peaking here. I'm talking about easing off the heavy lifting and easing off all the drills and heavy throwing work so that the athlete can now, the image I always use with peaking is that we pull the rubber band, we pull the rubber band, we pull the rubber band. The key to being a great athlete is let it go, and then it shoots off and hits your friend in the ear. If I could give advice to any young coach, it would be, you got to let it go. There comes a time you just can't keep pulling that poor rubber band. You have to let it go. You can't keep adding more and more and extending practice longer and longer. Every time I've been around a failing institution in sports, especially American football, our practices lasted longer and longer and longer, and less and less and less got done. So we begin with what I call the foundational heavy lifting. And if you know my work, you would recognize this as easy strength, but I summarize it here just a little bit differently. These are the rules of heavy lifting. Every day is, and it can be even day 1 of 80, but let's just pick the standard number I usually use in the deep early season, 40 days. If you lift 5 days a week, 40 days sneaks up on around 2 months. With life, it extends out a little bit more. So I try to tell my athletes that every single workout is day 1 of 40 days. Every single day is day 1 in a sense, because each and every day is an opportunity to work on getting stronger. I have a few exercises when you don't know what to do. Deadlift when in doubt. For throwers, I like rack deadlifts with the bar either 1 inch below their knee or 1 inch above their knee. There's some other deadlifts that work pretty well. Not a huge fan of the trap bar deadlift because so many people do it so poorly, they get that weird position like that. But correctly done trap bar deadlifts can be very good. And my friend Bill convinced me that the old straddle or Jefferson deadlift might have some real value for throwers, but let's just put that off for a discussion for another time and day. I do like my throwers to press. There is a need for basic strength. The deadlift will get you that, and of course, you need to have some kind of press. I'd love it if you did something quick. If you're discus throwers, I like the snatch. Hammer throwers, I like the snatch and snatch variations. For shot putters, the clean and jerk is wonderful. The clean and press is wonderful. And then somehow work the abs. Now, I've never had success with a lot of variations in the ab world. I certainly like the ab wheel foundationally, but after that, I have to go with what Stu McGill taught me. He listened to a talk of mine, went back up and studied it. The king of the throwing ab work is the suitcase carry, the one-handed farmer walk. But I also include here the Saxon side bend. That's when you hold a load overhead and go to the sides like this. Waiter walks, where you hold a load in one hand and walk, and what we call cross walks, where you do the suitcase carry in one hand and the waiter walk in the other. Very simple program. If you did deadlift, press variation, and like snatches, that's a pretty good career right there. I wasn't going to discuss variations on those movements, but I have been a big fan of what the East Germans did years ago, where they did bench press followed by incline press, followed by decline press, followed by military press, either switching weekly or every 2 weeks or monthly, depending on the situation you have. So when I talk about variation in the weight room, especially for throwers, the variation in the weight room, there's three words I use. There's wild variation, there's mild variation, and there's no variation. For throwers, wild variation doesn't work. I mean, to go from Olympic snatches to kipping pull-ups that's wild variation, but it's not going to help. I like mild variation. Maybe you change the position you snatch in, you change the grip you do a lift in, you change from bench press to incline to decline. Those mild variations. Oddly, no variation works really well too. I hate to use the word, but some athletes do get bored, which is an issue, but I have to kind of go, oh, well, okay. Life, success is not boring, but the day-to-day trip to success can be. This is nothing new. Now, one of the places I really got a lot of my information from was the great Australian track and field coach, Percy Cerruti. The reason I paused on Cerruti is I've been told 5 different ways how to pronounce his name. Cerruti talked about strength training in several of his books, and this is what he recommended. One-handed swings up to half body weight for 20. It's not the modern kettlebell swing. Cheat or power curls with full body weight, good lift. Bench press, full body weight. Deadlift, double body weight. And sit-ups, 25 reps with 25 pounds. Now, he wrote this. I have 3, maybe 4 different versions of this particular workout in my books and articles. So it changes just a little bit from one publication to another. By the way, he did not believe in heavy squats. He felt that hill sprints were much more valuable, and that's basically the same lesson I learned as a coach. One thing I had on the last one had the asterisk. It says here, don't embarrass me. Cerruti's numbers were for long distance guys. He expected marathoners to bench body weight and deadlift body weight, not strength trainers. I go on to make a little funny here, like runners, double body weight deadlifts. And then I'll work with a gym rat, a strength guy who's afraid to try a double body weight deadlift. And it's like, hey, listen, a guy who can run 26.2 miles can deadlift double body weight, and you're afraid to do it yourself. So let's raise our standards up a little bit as we discuss throwing strength and football strength and basic strength. Now, if you have any confusion about the heavy throwing time, I have a free PDF in the downloads called A Contrarian Approach to the Discus Throw. You certainly can do this with any throwing event, but if I ever coach football again, we're going to use circuits in our training. This is one of my favorite circuits. This is the power. We would begin with some of our athletes would be throwing power balls into a wall. A power ball is a 4 to 6 pound rubber ball with a handle on it. And we would do the basic full turn drills there. While that's going on, another group of my throwers would be doing farmer walks. While that's going on, another group of my throwers would have a stick here on their shoulders and a connected stick on their hips, so that when they twist, when the shoulders and hips twist, they form an X. And we would have them practice making sure they have an X throughout the throw. A group over there would be doing overhead squats with a reasonable weight, and then a group over there would be doing tire tossing. We play catch doing this, and they would be doing the discus drills too. After you tire toss, back to the power balls in the wall, farmer walk, X sticks, overhead squats, and you just keep rotating through. I've had athletes count the number of turns they do in a training session. It's not unusual to do up to 500 turns a day using our methods. Now, this is the heavy lifting, heavy throwing circuit. With the farmer walks and the overhead squats, you are getting your strength training in, and there's not going to be a whole much more for you to do. I also have done hill sprints in the middle of this circuit at one school I worked at that had a nice hill up and down from the football field. But we found that to be a little bit difficult to work in smoothly until I realized that we would just have them do one hill sprint during the whole cycle and really try to emphasize quality. So that particular area became a little bit more resting part of the circuit, and it worked really well. And then, of course, there's nothing new with what I just said. When I first started to study track and field back in probably 1971, 1972, I read the Track and Field Omnibook by John K. Doherty, and he talked about a German coach named Peter Sheen, who I have later realized was a genius. He talked about something called mixed training. Mixed training, and this has become a staple of how I coach now, is when there is no strength period in the workout, there's no agility period, there's no technical period. You do kind of everything at once, and it's called mixed training. One of the things I did when I was coaching at Utah State, and it was interesting because I only had, I had an Olympic bar, 45-pound plates, 35s and 25s, only one of each, and I had these very fine athletes I was working with. So what I began to do is have them Olympic lift, logically, between sets of throwing. And I look back now, and that's probably some of the smartest training I ever did in my career for people. So one of the things I do now is I ask my athletes, or I'll just bring it myself, a kettlebell out to the field. And the example I have here is called the new circuit. We bring out one kettlebell to the track, the 24-kilo bell. And so I have the athlete, we'd have to have two, but we do crosswalks, do some throws, kettlebell snatch, do some throws, military presses, maybe half kneeling throws, waiter walk, throw. So after every round of, say, 5, 6 throws, we would do a quick little swift kettlebell thing. If the athlete needs, if they're feeling a little stiff, we're going to do goblet squats. If the athlete needs a little snap, we'll do some snatches. You can make this much more organized than I'm explaining it now. And I did that when I was training for the Weight Pentathlon years ago. The Weight Pentathlon is the shot, discus, javelin, hammer, and 35-pound weight throw. Because I was spending so much time in the field, I decided I can't then go lift weights. So I brought my 28-kilo kettlebell out with me, and I would try to balance my lifting with my throws training. And it resulted in the American record, so I would argue that that worked. Again, circuit training, as we know, is nothing new. I have the old German textbooks over there in circuit training. I also just picked up another German book on cross training. But this is something from the 1980s This program is called the German Javelin Program. I first read this in the work of Klaus Bartenitz, and I thought this was brilliant. My one simple knock on this is that you have to have a number of bars to pull this off, but we'll come up with a solution for that in just a second. In this example, power clean 60K times 10. That'll get your heart going. Squat 70K times 10. Power snatch 50. Front squat 60, and then do 25 crunches, and you do that multiple times. I don't like the fact that you need to have either one barbell and plate changes, or you would need, in this example, 3 barbells, which just is really difficult for one athlete to use. So I came up with a solution to that, which may or may not be as good. We did it a number of years at the discus camp in Denison University, and I found it to be very successful. And this is what we call the fun finisher. So one hand clean times 10, one hand military press, one hand snatch, one hand front squat, switch sides, and repeat. That's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. I had the 28 doing this. Many people probably can't press the 28 10 times, which can be a problem. But if you just have like a 16K bell, that would be good for a high school boy, 12-8 for females. You're going to get a nice little heart pounder. You're going to take care of that conditioning we talk about. And it also is throws like. And that's one of the big keys with working with explosive athletes. You can't do a lot of things that are, you certainly need them in the background, but you can't do a lot of things that are grinding, because we're trying to get the athlete to snap, snap, snap. You need a base, of course, but we want to think about finishing fast. The phrase we use in the throws is last throw, best throw. And when we finish a workout, we want to be a fast finish. Now, on this next part, on peaking, my book Now What goes through all the details on this. But first, there's a point I want to make. I don't believe in peaking. I've never seen it work. I always joke that the teams I work for are peaking for the Super Bowl, which is funny because if you don't play well all year long, you're never going to make it to the Super Bowl. If peaking worked, then everybody at the Olympic trials would get seasonal bests. And nobody does. Well, very, very few people do. There's 3 things I try to use to help people peak. The first is this concept called no static. Static is all the energy going in all those different directions except into the implement or into the jump or into the game. We try to bring static down by raising the arousal level in training. And the best example I know is called one-throw competitions. You can also do this, by the way, in the vertical jumps. Have a team-wide competition, and you have a 5-foot high jumper going against a 7-foot high jumper, but they both only get one jump. Well, the winner is the person who gets closest to their personal record. Now, the 7-footer is only going to, if he picks 6'10", doable, he only gets one attempt at it. And there's a good chance they're going to biff that attempt. So one-throw competitions is when I let you warm up, do all the magic you need to do, put on the magic socks, drink your liquid aid, whatever the magic is, and then you just get one throw. But here's the thing, folks. In competition, it almost always comes down to one throw. It almost always comes down to one jump. In American football, it often comes down to a kick or a catch. And so life is about one in elite performance. One of the things that doing the one-throw competition teaches my athletes is that all that extra nonsense that they've added doesn't carry over under the pressure of one throw. When I coach people technically, I often do a lot of isometric work to teach them the position, the technique, of where they need to be. And what we're trying to do in this case is build up the static, as much as we can, and then we shake it off And then the athlete does the movement again, and magically, everything gets back to the way it was. The athlete hits the position that they trained in. So sometimes we need to raise the tension, raise the arousal level, so we can teach how to take it all off and make it a clean, perfect throw. And the third one is funny, the courage to stay in bed on a snowy Saturday morning. In track and field, coaches aren't supposed to coach at events. And I take that very seriously, to the point that I've had many phone calls on the morning of state meets where the kid will call me on the phone and say, "Coach, guess what? I'm the state champion." But one of the reasons I try to let my athletes compete alone is that number one point, static. When they're alone and they have to answer their own questions, it's slick in the middle of a ring, or they're angry about something, or they didn't have their magic food or anything. I want them to deal with it logically and intelligently. One of my favorite stories, of course, is about Eric. I got a call one morning on a Saturday. He says, "Coach, I just won the state championship." And I'm like, "Wow." And I was impressed because he shouldn't have. And I go, "Well, what happened?" He goes, "I was so nervous. All I could remember was the first thing you ever taught me." And I'm like, "Oh boy, this better be good." Well, what he did was stomp his right foot, it's a technical thing, and pick it up in the discus. Well, by picking up his right foot early, he was able to stay ahead of the discus, and he had a lifetime best throw of about 23 feet on his opening throw because he was so nervous. That's the phone calls I want. That's when I know I've trained someone correctly, is when they perform at their optimal under the highest levels of pressure. Now, let's sit back and talk about what we can learn from each other, what throwers can teach kettlebellers and what kettlebellers can teach us. Well, those of you who are in conditioning, those of you who are in kettlebells, this is what you can learn from me. The great lesson of track and field, and I learned this from my coach, Ralph Mon, is it's all about continuous acceleration. When I teach the kettlebell snatch, one of the things I try to teach is that you don't hit it and then just relax. You hit it and you continue to accelerate it. Continuous acceleration is the secret to superior sports performance. Coach Mon used to joke, there's two ways you can do this. You can start off slow and go faster. Or you can start off fast and go faster. He had a great wit about him. I thought that was funny. The next is a technical point called push the car up the hill. But the next time you find yourself in trouble in the weight room or trouble as throwing something, just find a broken down car and push it up a hill. One of the first things you'll notice when you push a car up a hill is that you'd better be on that back end of the car. Most people, when I watch them train and do things in the weight room, their feet will be in this direction, their hands will be in this direction, their belly button will be in this direction. When you're pushing a car up a hill, your shoulders, your hands, your hips, your knees, your feet are all pushing the car up the hill. If you want to throw far, pretend you're pushing the car up a hill, then twist away and try to get back in that position. Number 3 is a hard one to understand. It ties back to static, but we call it leakage. You got to check for leakage. And leakage is when, instead of putting all your power in one direction, you start to put your power in one direction and then shrink a shoulder up, bend an elbow, and all of a sudden you got power going in 7 directions. That's what we call leakage. If you go to punch somebody, you're in a fight, you want to punch somebody, and then you decide to turn your wrist like this as it gets close to hitting them in the face, that leakage is probably going to break your wrist. Okay? So constantly check for energy waste, which is leakage. Finally, one of the great things about throwing is this thing we call whipping. When I do kettlebell swings, what most people misunderstand is after my hinge, that big throw forward, I'm trying to stop the whip at the top. Now, the phrase I use is plank, but I'm going to squeeze my lats, squeeze my abs, and grab that thing and stop it from going through the wall or hitting someone down 50 feet away from me. I'm stopping. I'm trying to make everything whip. What makes the discus, the hammer, the javelin, the shot, any Highland game thing go far isn't grinding, it's whipping things out. And then the fifth thing you can learn is when you're talking to throwers and Olympic lifters and you say you're strong, be sure you stop for just a moment and remind what we think is strong. Let's talk about more about that. You know, I joke about how low these standards are. These come from my friend Tom Fahey. But to be a national, international level thrower, you have to be able to snatch, the Olympic snatch, 250, clean 300, bench 400, squat 450. Late in my career, I could take 8 weeks off and do probably all 4 of those in my first or second workout back. I've benched 400 multiple times in khaki pants and a polo shirt. And then I stop and I realize that the number of people I know who've ever benched 400 isn't very high. And this is the basic lowest level of strength that throwers have to be. In American football, a friend of mine was a coach at a university. The weakest guy on his team was his punter, and he could clean 308 pounds. The weakest guy on his team was the punter. He could clean 308, 140 kilos. So when you think about what strong is, start to think about what elite standards are, and then just kind of relax and remember. But the best lesson I've learned is working with, they call themselves the Garavics, but working with kettlebellers, I learned some great lessons that I continue to use in my career. Folks, I'm always trying to learn more. Number one, you don't have to be 40% body fat to be an athlete. You don't need to be a big, sloppy mess to be a great athlete. I look back at my career and I almost want to cry. When I was in high school, I weighed 162 pounds and I threw the discus 162. When I was in college, I would get as light, I weighed about 218 pounds, sometimes a little more, and threw 190. And then I was given advice by these people at this very famous place. There's 5 rings, there's a hint for you, who told me I needed to put on weight, get my squat up, and eat carbs. Well, I garbaged out for a couple years, got my body weight up to 273, and didn't throw nearly as far as I used to be. I should have stuck with what I knew was right. You got to be lean and mean. The second thing I learned from Garavics is time is an essential component for training. One of the things I liked so much when I first got involved in the kettlebell community was how much the word density was used. Density is the same amount of work in less and less and less time. The kettlebell is a gifted tool for density work. Once I started to understand that, I began to try to do the same with my Olympic lifting workouts. If I'm doing 8 singles, 8 doubles in the snatch, a traditional Dave Turner workout, and I'm using just 165, and it takes me 16 minutes to do it on Monday, my goal is to try to make 15 minutes on Wednesday and maybe 14 minutes on Friday. And once I get to a certain number, then I'd go up and load. Number 3, and I learned this when I went to California, and my training facility was a porch that was smaller than my area right here. You can train in a small area. All I had was a 28 kilo kettlebell, and I would do long, wonderful workouts on that little porch. Some of the best training in my throwing career. And the final point here, real strength doesn't necessarily need to be in a big package. I don't use strength to weight ratios as much as I use cost to benefit ratios. And that's wrong. Strength to weight ratio is one of the great secrets of training at a high end. Sometimes big things come in small packages. When you're talking about elite performance, especially, no one cares how much you weigh on the scale. All people care about is how far the implement goes, how high you jump. Don't be afraid to get as strong as you can, keeping your weight at a reasonable level as an athlete. I'm Dan John, and I hope you got something from this.